Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Monsieur Bizot. I'm Alain Werner. I represent 38 civil parties in this trial. I have just a few questions for you. First question. Yesterday, you referred to your privileged position or status within M3, and to quote you, you said you enjoyed a favored, privileged treatment in terms of food and not being beaten. And from what you told us yesterday and from what you say in your book, it was quite clear that it is the accused who granted you these favorable circumstances. Mr. Bizot, do you know whether the accused had received permission from his superiors to give you such favored treatment? François Bizot. I have no way of knowing. I can't even surmise. I can't say that I surmise or don't surmise. I simply can't answer this question. The lawyer. Yesterday, you mentioned the fact that the accused did not talk much. He was very busy with his duties. So, Mr. Bizot, what did you see and what did you hear that made you understand this? François Bizot. This was quite clear from the apparent personality of the accused at that time, and he also had a reputation amongst the guards. The young guards had great respect. They were in awe of the accused due to the long hours that he worked on files or in his general duties. He worked a lot. And consequently, he had a reputation, the reputation of a serious, very responsible person, and for this he was highly respected amongst the guards. And I myself could see that my own statements were always matched with what I had said a week before or 2 weeks before, and that this comparison over time of the different things that I had said and written was always done in a very meticulous and thorough fashion. And in the 2 last days, at the time of being released, of being unchained, and when I was able to speak to Lai and Son and to some other people, these were not discussions, these were just dialogues of a few sentences between my co-detained. There was always this sense of the accused being a person who was very committed to his work and did his work in a very responsible fashion. The co-lawyer. I want to clarify a couple of things. Yesterday, you said that when somebody was taken away for execution, he was never informed of this. And further, when you answered a question from Judge Lavergne, I had the feeling that you had not been the witness of any executions. When you say that when people were led away to be executed, they were never informed. So how do you know this? Can you clarify this for us, please? François Bizot. I can speak for my own case in the first place. Indeed, on the first day after being arrested and before arriving at M13, when I was judged and when I was sentenced possibly not to the death penalty, but I was blindfolded and led away with a number of armed persons around me. I asked them, "Where are you taking me to?" And they kept saying, "Atoite, atoite," meaning don't worry, don't keep your cool, don't worry. And this phrase was repeated to me whatever the place they were taking me to. I was, in the end, not executed, but I was certainly under the very strong feeling that I was about to die, and atoite was constantly repeated to me. And then, and once again, there is no doubt a measure of anachronism in what I'm going to tell you in relation to the true sequence of facts, but it's quite clear that this atoite phrase or leitmotif, which means don't worry, just, keep cool, keep going, don't worry, don't worry. This phrase, and this was confirmed to me later on, in particular when I came back to Cambodia and I talked to people who'd been with the Khmer Rouge over the 4 years from 75 to 79. It appears that the person who was doomed, who was going to be killed just with a blow of a club, this person was never told that he was going to be executed, in spite of the fact that it was very blatantly clear that he or she was going to be executed. I hope I've provided a satisfactory answer. The co-lawyer, just another clarification. Yesterday you were referring to somebody who reported on people, and you said that this informer died in the camp. How did he die? Could you tell us more about that? He died of an acute bout of malaria, and because there was some empathy between him and me, he was the only person who, either out of his own initiative or upon authorization from Duch, would come and find me and talk to me quite freely. He told me about his father. He was very sorry about the fact that his father, at the time when I was in M13, had passed away, and he could not forgive himself not being there with his father, because he had promised his father that he would be with him on the day of his death. And possibly feeling a very strong emotion because of this circumstance. A few days later, or sometime later, he experienced, like many other prisoners, an acute bout of malaria, and he too passed away. But before dying, he asked to see the Frenchman. I'm not too sure now where he was, but I think he was in one of the huts. I don't know, anyway. I don't remember where he was exactly, physically. But the guards specifically unchained me to allow me to go and pay him a visit. And when I arrived close to him, he couldn't identify me, he didn't recognize me, and he died within seconds of my arrival. So those are the circumstances that concern that particular person. I'm not sure whether he was someone who reported on others, but as a prisoner he certainly felt that he hadn't done anything wrong, and he had been there for over a year. He was awaiting his release from day to day. He was extremely sorry that he hadn't been released prior to the death of his father. There was another circumstance another moment when I can't myself say whether the person was an informer or not. Anyway, an old man came up to me one evening, I think after dusk, and gave me half a kilo of powdered sugar. This old man said to me, I was around at the time of the Japanese. The French prisoners who tried to run away never succeeded. And so he actively encouraged me, or very clearly discouraged me from trying to run away, because there was just no way for me to get out of there. That is what he said to me. So here, have some sugar, it's good for you, you need to feed yourself, but please don't run away. I was extremely surprised that this farmer, basically, who was not a prisoner of the camp, I was extremely surprised that he would be taking such a risky, doing something so risky to come and bring me some sugar and give me his advice. And so I was very grateful for that sugar. And thereafter I did wonder whether perhaps this person had been told to come and talk to me to try and discourage me from wanting to run away. And I must say that I certainly did want to run away. Right from the 1st of January, I had decided that I would try to run away, thinking that I had not a chance of being released if I had not been released by the end of 3 months. I still have just a couple more questions, Your Honor. One question on the interrogations. I could not give any proof of my being not guilty, you said yesterday, Mr. Bizot, and you said also that at one point you felt that you would not be able to prove that you were innocent. And responding to a point by Mr. Robert Petit, you talked about the joke. So, Mr. Bizot, do you think that a Cambodian, somebody who would not be an educated person like you, an erudite, not somebody from the École Française d'Extrême-Orient, do you think that a Cambodian being interrogated by the accused under such circumstances would be capable of proving his innocence? In the same way as you ultimately did succeed in proving your innocence. François Bizot, I don't think this would be possible. I don't think this would be possible. I'm not saying that I know it would not be possible, but I don't think it would be possible. I think that being in a detention camp where there was basically no way out other than being guilty, there was no other option. I also have the sense that any attempt to say that charges against oneself were unjust, were not grounded, any such utterance would simply just make the unavoidable outcome of death, would just postpone it a little bit. I'm not sure that I convinced the accused that I was innocent. I think this is an idea that he developed himself on the basis of his own putting together the different things that I said during interrogations and what he could understand from Lai and Son regarding my own activities. In a way, and this gives me only pain in the memories I have of this, but the presence of Lai and Son in this camp, I think, was a fundamental asset towards my release, because everything I said was only, no doubt, ever, it was always, I think, confirmed by what they said when they were interrogated. The co-lawyer, one last point. Mr. Bizot, microphone please. Now, in the many interviews of you in the press over the last months and years, there is a recurrent theme, which is that behind the mask of a monster, one must seek to see the human being, and it seems that you have successfully seen the human being. This is your achievement, and we respect that on behalf of the civil parties, but one could say that you've not only been a victim of the accused, you've been detained by an organization, the Khmer Rouge, and you know, of course, what they did thereafter to this country that you love. Do you have the same approach now of understanding, seeing the human being behind the executioner as regards the Khmer Rouge leaders who are still alive, who are detained here, and with whom you've had no interaction? I'm thinking in particular of Nuon Chea. Can you see the man, the human being in Nuon Chea too? François Bizot. Yes, sir. I haven't finished. What I want to say is that to fully understand the full extent and depth of the action of the executioner, and you've just referred to Nuon Chea, namely, be it Nuon Chea or the accused here. Now, to fully measure, appreciate the depth of the horror, one can only do this by fully understanding the humanity in such a person. If we turn these people into monsters, a category apart from human beings, with which we can have no identification as human beings, not identification with what they've done as criminals, but identification as human beings, then I think there is no way we can have any kind of grasp of what they've perpetrated. If we try to understand that these are people with the same capacities otherwise as ours, we may feel deep fright. But there is this segregation that we need to avoid between the people who are capable of killing and us who are not capable of killing. Unfortunately, we seem to have a much more frightening understanding of the executioner. Actually, when we look at the executioner as a truly human being. On the other hand, to seek to understand is not to condone. On behalf of whom might we be able to forgive? On behalf of those who died? I don't think so. And the sheer horror of what happened, what was done in Cambodia, and this is not exclusive, this does not belong only to this unfortunate country. The screams of victims must be heard, and we must never allow ourselves to think that that scream is excessively loud. The harshest condemnations that we can have against the accused can never be harsh enough. It's not a question of condoning or forgiving what has been done. In my approach, and this approach need not at all be that of the victims, my approach is simply to try and understand the drama that took place in the forests of Cambodia, as in those of other countries and in other circumstances of our history, including in the most recent history. Thank you for answering my questions, says the co-lawyer. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
The President Next, we would like lawyer group 2 to proceed with further question if you would wish to do so.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Silke Stutzinski. I'm co-lawyer for civil parties. Mr. Bizot, I would come back to something, let's say your relationship with the accused during your 3-month stay, which you described, and in the English translation was translated a kind of familiarity. Could you please tell us how often and on which subjects, if you remember them, you had communication and intellectual exchange, as I understood yesterday, with the accused?
François Bizot. I would see the head of the camp, Duch, the accused, practically every day. I was unable to hold back my tears, my suffering, and the feeling that of injustice that I was feeling. And this would come across most of the times as, well, this would be expressed through anger. I would express this through, my anger was vain, of course, myself. During the interrogations and during the questions that Duch would ask me, I would find a way to express the unbearable injustice of this accusation carried against me. Well, I would find some kind of reliefs by asking him questions in return. This would relieve me. And I must say that he went along and he spoke to me about his family, so that maybe I'm adding this so that I could speak about my family, maybe. And he spoke to me about when he used to teach mathematics, for example. Maybe also so that I could speak about what I was doing. But all of this, however, did create some kind of regularity in my daily dealings with him. And we would go over the discussions of the day before. I was contradicted on certain points that I brought up that did not correspond to what he had maybe written down in his reports. So all of this created, I must say, a kind of, let's say, regularity, habit that built, well, let's say, if I drew from this experience in the camp, if I experienced a shock that I cannot forget, which was to see the man behind the henchman, well, I think that he did with me what no henchman should do in a certain way. That is to say that he also was able to see the man behind the spy, the man behind the prisoner. And that's one of the reasons maybe that explains that Duch considered my case with a special amount of attention, contrarily to the case of the other prisoners. It was maybe because these interrogations that lasted so long were able to create some kind of bond, some kind of humanity between us. And therefore, sending me to my death became something more difficult than when you send people that you have dehumanized to their death, or in any case, people that you did not seek to humanize. I don't know if I answered your question, Ms. Studzinski.
Yes, thank you. I come back to one part of my question. Am I right that that I can, or the word to call it, also not only questioning or returning with questioning him, but also did you discuss? Can it be described as a discussion on matters like, for example, your work Buddhism, but not as an interrogation, but more during the time, more a discussion and exchange than an interrogation?
François Bissot. I wouldn't say that. I think that all of these discussions were for a given purpose, with a clear objective, which was, of course, to corner me, to bring me to contradict myself. I do not know if the consistency of my answers was always satisfactory, but however, for him, a certain amount of elements transpired from these that allowed him to believe that I was not a CIA spy. And that's what he expressed to his superiors afterwards. And I don't think that there was maybe except for the last day when I was released, or that there was something that was simply friendly or free, or no. The context was too hellish for that. We could not speak about. You could not speak about a normal relationship between a jailer and a prisoner, especially in a camp such as M13.
The President, we would like now to invite lawyers Group 3 to put questions, if you would wish to do so.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Counsel Canon, I am in charge of Civil Parties Group number 3. With my colleague Mok Sovanari, we are defending 28 people. And she will ask you as well 2 questions later on. But I have 4 short questions to ask you. The first question, I would like to know, Mr. Bizot, if you became aware during your detention of the number of executions that were carried out there. Did you know how many executions were carried out at M13 while you were there? François Bissot. I have the impression, that I came up with some kind of estimate in my book, and things are no longer clear to me, however, in my memory, in my recollection now. Executions were hard to tell because I always had the impression that the people who would step out of the camp were brought to be executed. So if I came up with a figure, it would be too aleatory. I think there were about 15 people who died of malaria when I was there. So unfortunately, I cannot be more specific concerning the amount of executions that took place. while I was at M13. I would add, however, that I have the feeling that all of the prisoners that I saw come in, that I saw that these prisoners probably did die. Yes, indeed. Council Canon, you told us yesterday that you had witnessed confession and self-criticism sessions that were held on a regular basis. You understood Khmer, you spoke Khmer, so therefore could you give us an idea of the nature of these confessions and of these self-criticism sessions? What was the content of these sessions? François Bizot. Well, they were essentially training, indoctrination sessions, political teachings, the political training of the young guards, I could say. And the level of the discussions between the young guards and the instructors was similar. Well, there were guards who were about 14 to 18 years old, and instructors was that kind of level of discussion, and they were talking about small, little, ridiculous mistakes that they might have made and that they could self-criticize about, with the purpose of correcting them, so that they could correct their behavior and go and adhere better to the revolutionary line. These sessions were called Lien Sod. This was the Buddhist term that was used. It's a word used for praying and for religious education. So the same term was used for these sessions, and there were a certain number of expressions that the Khmer used that were in fact drawn from Buddhist teachings, the Buddhist discipline, let's say the Buddhist disciplinary mechanisms are also subjected to self-criticism as well, for example. And the young revolutionaries, therefore, would say, for example, that they had forgotten maybe to pick up the laundry that was drying the day before, and that it had rained during the night, and therefore that the shirts were wet because of him, and each one would accuse himself of small little things to prove their dedication. Where it became much more perverse was the second round, when it was the second round in these sessions, where it was the neighbor who, the person sitting next to you, let's say, who would, when one of the young guards was called upon to help his colleague bring up points that he had forgotten to bring up, and then it became everything turned into bickering, but it never went that far. The idea was, let's say, to establish some kind of moral ground, revolutionary moral ground, to each one of the people participating in these sessions. Council Canon, I'd like to get back, Mr. Bizot, to your own interrogations. Were you ever presented with false forged documents to try to confuse you that were related to your supposed guilt? François Bizot. No, at no moment something like that happened. Maître Canon, I like to step aside from the facts, because many questions were asked to you on these, but I think the distance that you took deliberately in relation to your events allows me to ask you questions on your feelings. Would you permit me to ask you some questions about your emotional response to all of this? So my last question is double, I could say. During the investigation and during Duch's detention, you asked to meet him. You requested that, and we understood that, and I agree with my colleague Werner in terms of our respect for this decision, and we understand your desire to try to understand the complexity of Duch. So I have two half questions. So today, would you, the remorse, the regret that were not demonstrated back then, at no moment, well, do you believe that Duch feels this remorse today? And my second question, when you leave when he says to you, "Oh, French comrade, do not forget us, comrades." If these people were here today, what would these people expect from this trial, from this confrontation? And you understood beyond. What do you think the civil parties can expect beyond the two companions that were with you, whom you left behind in the camp? What do you believe that the civil parties can expect from such a trial, Monsieur Bizot? Mr. Bizot, I cannot answer